Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me to this beautiful place. And I feel really the expectations in this historic site, also in a site with really importance in the history of science, as you all know. And he's looking at me now, so I better perform. I will talk about the ethics of technology in sport technology. A bit different topic than what has been previously researched on these sites, but perhaps our paths cross when we move into genetic technologies. But anyway, let's come to that. So ethics then is the attempt to think critically and systematically about value tensions and value challenges. And technology poses some of these challenges to sport as it does in general society. And sometimes scholars argue that these tensions are so many, these challenges are so many and so complex that to handle them in rational ways, to draw distinctions between what is allowed and what is not allowed becomes impossible. And this book from 2018, written by an American scholar and cultural analyst, Yvonne Fouché, is an interesting discussion of how the technological, the techno-scientific, and the organic, the athlete's body, gradually merge. So the author of this book argues that strict line drawing in doping cases, in the differentiation between prosthetic limbs and organic limbs, critical discussions of various kinds of equipment being allowed or not allowed is not easy anymore. The technological and the organic merge. And this is the future of the human being. And sport just has to learn to live with this. Sport is too conservative in terms of technology, Fouché argues. And I think he's right on many points, but he does not suggest that we should not try. And I will try. I will try to define sport technology. I will try to draw some distinctions between different kinds of technology and what seems to be acceptable and what seems to be not acceptable. And then, obviously, at the end, conclude. First, do some conceptual work. Like in philosophy, some people kind philosophers conceptual engineers. They discuss concepts, they try to define them, they try to explain the relationship between them. And this is some basic conceptual work. Technology can be defined in many ways. A couple of suggestions here. A dictionary definition, saying that these are practically all the means designed by a social group to provide for material comforts. An alternative definition says that these are the means, material devices designed, I can read here, designed and manufactured to make existing human activities easier or to make possible activities which people have dreamt of engaging in, but to which we are not biologically adapted, like flying or like jumping out of an aeroplane with a parachute. Well, the aeroplane itself is a technological wonder, basically. But we're not really biologically adapted for flying, but we can fly because of our technological imagination and skill. So technology, the easy definition is human-made means to realize human aims and goals. And sport technology then would be human-made means to realize interests and goals in sport. So what are these means? And what are the functions of these means? So technology in sport has many functions. One very basic function is the constitutive function. Without basic technologies, a lot of sports would not exist. Without the tennis racket, without the board and the kite, these activities wouldn't have existed. Without the bicycle, biking, it does not exist. Maybe a few sport events like track and field, run, jump, and throw would exist, although in throwing you throw objects. Some of them are quite complex technological objects, a javelin, for instance, with a weight, balance, and so on and so forth. So very few sports can be realized without technology. So technology really can have a constitutive function in sport. Without them, the sport wouldn't exist, without this kind of technology. I won't go in detail now. This is a big discussion. Video games, e-games, e-sports. But of course, without technology, no virtual reality, no e-games, no e-sports. Whether these should be counted as sports or not, whether a FIFA game is sport, whether you need more movement in a FIFA game to qualify for sport, whether these kind of shooting games could qualify as sport. These are big discussions. But as many of you know, e-games are now parts of the Olympic program to a certain extent, and they will come for sure. What kind of e-sports? Obviously, probably not this kind due to the content of the sport, but they will be there. So technology defines a new area for doing sports in virtual space. A constitutive function. A more traditional function, as compared to esports, the constitutive function is a traditional function. Another function is to reduce the risk of harm and injury, and these technologies are all over us these days. Protective gear, helmets, paddings on the body. If you look at this image, it doesn't seem that it really helps so much because these players are bigger, they're heavier, they're faster, the crashes are tougher, but definitely it will help to a certain extent. So new materials in tennis rackets to reduce the problems with overuse of tendons and joints and so on and so forth. Many of the technologies are promoted as also being harm reducing. A third function is enhancing fairness. You see this in the video-assisted refereeing systems. Many sports have these technologies. Hawkeye in tennis is another example. So technology has many functions in sports. And of course, the performance-enhancing function is a crucial one. The constitutive function, the harm reduction function are relatively uncontroversial. It's interesting to see new sports emerge. It's important to most people that some of these technologies reduce the risk of harm. When it comes to the performance-enhancing part of technologies, discussions and heated discussions emerge. And this example is the whole body suit in swimming being introduced in the early 2000s. You would know, Peter, being used in the World Championships in 2009. 20 world records were broken because this suit reduces water friction and you can swim faster. And in 2010, I believe, the International Swimming Federation said, no, we will ban this suit because it's very expensive and a few swimmers get the best suit, so it's unfair. And some said, it's not really swimming anymore. It's taking away this genuine skill, the tactile sensation of the expert swimmer from the sport of swimming, and it technologizes swimming and it de-skills swimming. So many arguments. Performance-enhancing technologies tend to be more controversial than, let us say, harm-reducing technologies. It's biomimetic design. It was called the shark skin suit. It's based on an evolutionary design, thousands and thousands of years old. It's interesting design, by the way. So most sport technology combines different functions. The bike, a constitutive function, better brakes, the helmet, a harm-reducing function, and a lighter bike, a stiffer frame, a better position on the bike, performance-enhancing functions. So many of these technologies are combined, many of these functions are combined in one and the same technology. So then I categorized and said a little bit about the concept of technology and the various functions of technology in sports. So obviously, as I said, the most heated debates tend to come with performance enhancement. So I will now concentrate on performance-enhancing technologies. The whole body suit is one example. Another, biomedical technology, that is a means developed to realize human interests and goals, being a pharmaceutical means in this instance. EPO is another kind of, in the sports setting, used in the sports setting as a performance-enhancing technology. So let's look into what kind of challenges we're talking about. So this will be another tentative categorization of performance-enhancing technologies. And as I said, many technologies are used to enhance performance. Some cause more debates than others. In a sense, body techniques is a technology. Human movement can be understood in many ways. We can understand human movement phenomenologically, like in terms of the experience, the sense of movement. Good athletes, good coaches, they have the sense of how it feels like to perform a certain technique in a good way. It can be understood biomechanically, where you analyze all the forces involved and you try to provide a mechanistic analysis of what's going on. And it can be understood basically as a means developed by humans in an activity that we are not really biologically predisposed for, evolutionary, but we can still manage to do. So a body technique can be a kind of technology. If you look at the technique on the image here, developed by a very gifted, creative athlete, Dick Fosbury, first presented during Mexico Olympic Games, well, the first successful event, won the gold medal in high jump with a radically new technique. And we are not genetically, biologically predisposed to jump over an obstacle like this, I assume. Most of us would face the obstacle and jump. So this is an invention, and it's a very creative invention. It is kind of a technology. Is it controversial? Most of the time, not. And I list the challenges in italic here. Most of the time, not. Most of the time, athletes who invent new techniques, body techniques, are admired for the creativity, the new way of handling the body. Sometimes it's controversial based on traditionalism. It doesn't look nice to jump with your back towards the bar. When they started to jump with the skis like this and not like this, the Norwegians said, no, we can't jump like this. But it turns out to be a beautiful way of jumping because you can fly when you have the V style. So traditionalist arguments usually fall quite easily when it's efficient and it's nice, it's admired. So the big debates here do not really arise unless it's a risky new technique. Like in gymnastics, sometimes with requiring extreme flexibility of the lower back, you had some exercises being banned. Other than that, these are admirable innovations in most instances. No big issue. No big issue, really. You have, if you move from the body to the next step, you have the athlete's interaction with material devices. And at its best, you see this deep interaction between material means and organic material. Some of the best skiers in the world, this would be maybe 110 kilometers an hour. Super G, a Norwegian skier, of course. And he interacts with his equipment, with the surface as a holistic system. The poles, the skis are prolongations of the body through which the skier feels and senses and interacts with the environment. There are immediate adjustments with the environment. So this all is a beautiful, meaningful, interactive system. And this is a positive message from technology. See what we can, look what we can achieve with technology, how we can expand our life world and do things that we previously thought were impossible. This is a millimeter of a steel edge on a ski where you balance, like parachuting and ski jumping. An optimistic message. It's a question of athletic excellence. There is always a question of the risk of harm. Is the new equipment harmful? When the carving ski came, some of you would know, there were concerns about it giving it provided too much of a rotation impulse, and it ruined the knees of the athletes, and there were regulations coming in. And always, is there an unfair advantage? Back to the swimsuit, is it accessible for all? Back to the, not back to, but the current challenge of the new running shoe with carbon plates. If only a few athletes run the marathon with a carbon plate, they have an advantage as compared to the others. We have to standardize. The rule today is that a shoe has to be on the market for at least 3 months before it can be used in competition. And there are standards for how much carbon there can be in the shoe. So this is usually a question about whether it's an unfair advantage or not. Standardize, you classify, the concern is equal access. Everyone should have the same access to the same quality of equipment. So this situation here is a quite new situation in the world of sport. Suddenly, there are prosthetics that are so well designed that what used to be thought of as a disability is considered a super ability. So Oscar Pistorius, somehow a pioneer, he has definitely other trouble these days than trouble related to sport classification, unfortunately. But the way he ran suddenly became an issue. Would the prosthetics be more efficient than a human leg, than organic material? Some said yes, some said no. Biomechanists had to come in and do their evaluation, and there was a big classification debate. I think it was the first Paralympic athlete to compete in the Olympics in London in 2012. This is just the beginning of a development we will see much more of. Move outside of the competition. Look at all the things and means athletes are using off competition. During training, some devices are designed to be able to train specifically off-season, like the roller ski. Actually, that has developed into a sport. There are world championships these days on roller skis. And actually, this is a much more fair sport in a sense than skiing on snow, because they all have the same equipment. Whereas on snow, there are huge differences in the quality of the waxing and preparation and so on and so forth. Another example, wearable technologies, giving you all information about bodily processes and so on and so forth. Are there issues here? Are there value issues challenging ideas of fairness, harm, health, well-being in sport? Not so much. There are no strict requirements on equal access here, are there? If people are creative, they come up with new and inventive ways of training, they have a step in front of the others. Others will definitely copy this if it's efficient. Well, is it harmful? I think this is a self-regulative system. If it's really harmful, who would continue if you get injured all the time? So there might be risks of harm, but again, some kind of self-regulation. The big issues here, I don't see. But I will comment on artificial intelligence a bit later. There are some issues that we have to take seriously. Well, we do this, all sports systems use technologies of various kinds when they train and prepare. We do advanced GPS analysis in the skiers and the other nations we compete with are really curious about how we use this, what we do, how we deal with the data. We can compare two skiers in a downhill track to see where is the most efficient line or track. In downhill skiing, as many of you know, the shortest line is usually not the fastest line, because you create too much friction and use energy and reduce speed. So this can all be analyzed, among other things, by the use of artificial intelligence tools that can handle immense amounts of data. This is not an experimental setting. There are a lot of variables, a lot of confusing stuff going on, but this is possible. So if this is very efficient, and this is a secret technology, it's definitely time to discuss whether it should open up and give everyone access. But if it's this constant struggle between elite systems to be more creative than the other during training, it's not necessarily unfair, I would argue. Then we move into the biomedical technologies. And here we really end up in challenging terrain. These means do not require interaction on the athlete's side, efforts on the athlete's side, although there is a bike within this hypoxic, inflatable hypoxic chamber. There is a bike, you can train there, but you can sleep there to enhance your blood values, hematocrit values, and then increase, presumably, your endurance. Not just presumably, but you can enhance your endurance. And you have the drugs, of course, the pharmaceutical means. Are there other problems here than with the other technologies? And if so, what are they and how can we deal with them? Again, there is a risk of harm argument. As you all know, in the doping debate, this is a prominent argument that drugs can really harm athletes and they can even kill athletes in the worst case scenarios. So this can be strong stuff. There is also the question of a fairness where if drugs are banned and those who use drugs get an advantage, then rule breakers get an unfair advantage. They don't play by the rules. The real challenge, however, because the risk of harm argument does not really hold in the drug debate. Hard training is harmful. Hard training can be. It implies balancing between the anabolic and catabolic processes of the body, not to get injured, not to get overtrained. If we legalize drugs, the unfairness argument falls. So this deals with something else and something more. There is something with these means that seems to contradict our intuitions, our feelings about what the sport should be all about, to most people, obviously. And there is a big anti-doping system trying to fight the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And I think it's really about our ideas about what a human performance is supposed to be all about, and what sport is supposed to be all about, to be a valuable activity in human culture. These are ethical issues. Ethical issues deal with basic questions, as I said, fairness, justice, harm, human well-being. And in sport, you have all these values and some of these value tensions, and you end up with quite a few ethical questions. And ethics is an academic field, a very old one, as you probably know. It's part of philosophy. It's our kind of philosophy, has roots in ancient Greece, in the 300 years before Christ. I mean, the big philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, they have ethical theories already then. And ethics is an old field. And it's not just a question of what you think or what you feel like or what is morally right for me and not for you. Those who are doing ethics, like myself, we really believe that ethics can be a field of rational and critical thinking and a rational and critical enterprise. And it's possible to distinguish between an ethical and an unethical standpoint, and it's possible to distinguish between a good ethical argument, well justified, where you clarify the premises and how you construct your argument, and a less good argument or a bad argument without really any justification at all. So I won't run through this whole form, but like in any other academic field, you have a challenge. You have a practical challenge. Should doping be banned or should it be accepted and legal? Well, how are you supposed to respond? Well, we have to look into the values and the values that might be challenged by this question, and you'll find ideas. In this case, we are now talking about sport. There are theories of sport ethics. There are ways of articulating ideals of fair equality opportunity, justice, non-harm principles in sport belong to sport ethics. Where does sport ethics come from? Well, of course, there are more general theories here. Deontology is basically a theory of duties and rights behind human rights, Kantian ethics. Consequentialism says, by the terminology, what it's all about. It's an estimation of the consequences of an action, not just for me, but for everyone concerned. Virtue ethics is an educational ethics, socialization. What values do you learn when you engage in sport? What are you taught? How can you become a good sport person? So there are theoretical, normative theories. There are meta-ethics. It's built up like a traditional academic field. And moving into this field is usually moving in between these levels and trying to use arguments in a systematic way to approach the issue, the tension in critical ways, and with openness on your premises and your arguments. Back to the issue. So should we ban? Let's concentrate now on the drugs. Should we ban performance-enhancing drugs in sport? This is really the issue. Not whether breaking the ban is wrong or not. People say doping is cheating. Well, it is cheating because it implies rule violation. But the ethical question is, why is a rule there in the first place? And how can it be justified? So to be able to justify a rule in a practice like sport, you need to have an idea of what the sport is all about. So let's say growth hormones. In some settings, there is a moral duty to use growth hormones if you have accessible hormones and if you know evidence-based, know that you have a patient who really needs this to recover and become healthy. Of course you use the drugs, the pharmaceutical products. There's a moral duty to use them, actually. In other settings, there is a moral duty, anti-doping proponents would say, not to use exactly the same product. And this makes sense because these are two very different practices with different goals. Here the goal is to help a patient to restore health. Here is the drug to compete on 100 meter. So you need, I've already said something about the normative aims or the goals and aims of this practice. So what are the goals and aims of this practice that could justify anti-doping rules? All games, all sports share a particular social logic, indicating what their aims are. Whatever game you can think of, whether it's a sporting game or another game, chess, whatever game you can think of, are defined by rules that prohibit the most efficient means to reach the goal. In soccer, don't touch the ball with your hands. Don't run in an offside position. This sport, it's quite obvious. If the goal is to cross a certain line on the ground, why the hurdles? Well, the hurdles make it interesting. So all sports, all games have these rules that forbid you the most efficient rules to reach a goal. Very different from everyday life. Look at traffic rules. The goal in traffic is safe and efficient transportation from A to B. So the rules in traffic is drive on the right-hand side, at least in most countries, stop on a red light, do this, do that, use the signal when you go out from a roundabout, traffic rules. They are instrumental rules. If we could have moved from A to B in an efficient and safe way without the rules, we wouldn't need them. Maybe soon we will transport ourselves in the air without these rules. Fine. But if you kick out the soccer rules, there is no soccer. So the rules in a game are constitutive and make up the practice and are intimately linked to the goal of the game. If you don't play soccer by the rules, you don't score goals. Goals depends on the player not being in the offside position and not using the hands. You can still come safely and efficiently from A to B, even if you drive past a red light in the middle of the night, no traffic around. I mean, don't do it, but you can reach the goal. But in a game, not possible. So game have a particular logic. Running for the train or the bus in the morning to be able to reach, a certain point of time to go to your work, you don't want a hurdle. But if you're a hurdle runner, you really want that obstacle because it's a game. This is not a game. This is an instrumental activity. This is a game. So the question then is to find out the goals and aims of sport. We take now a step back and then we will return to the doping issue, is why do we accept this? Why do we voluntarily accept these unnecessary obstacles to reach a goal? There are two theories. One is the thin theory. With the thin theory, I mean a theory that is not really concerned linking up with big values. More look at what's going on, define the rules. It's interesting to see what a human body, a human organism can perform at its really most extreme. Sports are concrete tests of human performance potential. So to be able to count as a performance in a sport, you have to keep the rules. See, how fast can you run 100 meters as compared to this and this and this runner? Well, you have to keep the rule. There is a starting shot, there is a timing, and so on and so forth. In the competition, keep the rules. Outside of the competition, no regulation whatsoever. Whatever you can do to enhance performance, you're free to do. It's a liberal policy. It's a policy based on a view of the human being as constantly transcending moral boundaries, traditional boundaries, enhancing itself, using all the possible technologies to become enhanced and to, in a technological optimism scenario, a better human being. The more we can enhance ourselves, the better. Elite sport would be the Formula One of the human beings. So in this scenario, it's up to you, basically. No anti-doping. The anti-doping rules would fall just as the amateur rules fell once upon in the history of sport. So there is opposition to the view. I mean, have you heard about the enhanced games? There is a plan now for the enhanced games. There are some people taking the initiative to get back to the true Olympic idea of where people can do whatever they want. Whether it will be ever organized or not, I'm not sure, but there is definitely the attempt to organize it. And this would be the thin view. So the argument then is the thin view in line with these ideals of sport? And is it up to anti-doping to justify their view, or is it even more challenging to justify the enhancement view? So imagine 200 meters then. It's a thought experiment. Imagine 100 meter where drug is allowed. Imagine a winning time of, what is the world record for women on the 100 meter? How much? Men's world record, women would be 10 something. Okay, remember, imagine then that the drug heat is on 9.5. They can use whatever they want. So imagine then the race to your right, where you have strict anti-doping rules, and imagine for once that all athletes really follow the doping rules. Imagine it's a 10.5 race. What is gained by the 9.5 race? The critics would say, well, if you want to compete, you have to use drugs. Imagine now that drugs really are efficient on the 100 meter, and certain drugs definitely are, I think. There is the cost of the drug. There is the cost of medical expertise to balance the drug. There is the cost of possibility of harm. And you know when you enter this system, if you want to compete at the highest level, it's very difficult to avoid the drugs. There is a 1 second less performance. On the right-hand side, the argument could be there is 1 second less excitement and joy of executing a sport. There is 1 second less good entertainment for the audience. There is no cost of this medical expertise and the drugs. There is a reduced risk of harm. So why should we legalize drugs in a sport? If you believe in this idea of the sociological gains. The burden of proof here would be, the argument is, on those who want to lift the ban on drugs, and not those who want to uphold the ban on drugs. And this would then be the tick theory, to give it a name, because the tick theory links sport to social and moral values, above and beyond just the practice of sport. In sport, you can admire what people are able to do with the talents, the cards they're given in life, through hard effort, resilience, taking losses with wins and losses with dignity, never give in, or sometimes giving in, sometimes cheating, sometimes falling out. I mean, these are human beings with their strong sides and their failures, and athletes can be identified with their performance. There is something authentic with the performance. It's not a performance induced by an advanced technical medical support system without athlete effort. It is something that is the product of me and my history and who I am and my background from the moment of conception to the moment of performance. It's a very interesting narrative that is a human narrative. So this is not just a performance. It is, as Thomas Murray argues strongly in his book, it's an admirable performance. In this sense, it's a question of human excellence, and sometimes the opposite, human failure. It's human. It's not perfect, it's human. As you can see on the image here, extremely impressive and admirable to see a person fighting all these challenges, being able to do what she's doing. I think there is an idea of the natural behind this. This can be discussed, of course, and the natural is a difficult concept. What is natural and what is unnatural? Is it natural to be in a swimming pool 5 hours a day? So the idea then is, it's a beautiful movie for those of you. Some of us have seen this movie. We're getting old, but it's a beautiful movie about the natural. It's a mythological movie, but anyway. So you can look at training and performance as an outcome of the utilization of the plasticity of the human organism as it is developed through evolution. That is an idea of the natural in sport. I mean, you do not interfere with pharmaceutical substances that overruns the systemic adaptation of the body. But training is impacting the systematic. The systematic training is impacting the plasticity of the body. You develop, you train again, you break down, you develop. Whereas using a drug is overrunning this systemic adaptation ability that is both individual and also a characteristic of the humans as developed in evolution. I think this is an idea of the natural, and there is something admirable in this idea in sport. It's not necessarily usable in all instances. Sport is special, and I think this is really a gut feeling with many sport enthusiasts. This idea, although the terminology now, of course, is probably terrible in a public lecture, but anyway. So I think this is what it's all about, really. It's not really about harm. Of course, you should reduce harm. But we could also imagine advanced pharmaceutical regimes where you almost take out the harm possibility. Sport is sometimes harmful, but harm can be weighed against other values. I think the basic value tension here is exactly this. It's about the idea of sport being a sphere of human excellence, where you have great talents. We're all unequal in terms of genetic talents, but it's not enough with a genetic talent. You need to work hard to develop. You need to master your talent. And there is something admirable in this. I mean, we all have probably need for some of these ideals in the world, in our own everyday life. How can I cope with myself? And how can I be a better version of myself? So that means you would cultivate athlete responsibility for performance. I mean, whole sport structures are built up on this. Why do we classify between men and women? Why do we have leagues? Why do we standardize equipment? Well, because equipment shouldn't determine the outcome. Why do we have rules on the wind, external conditions in a competition? Well, we don't want external conditions to ruin the measurement of performance. It shouldn't be an inequality in the equipment. We want to measure a particular kind of human inequality, and that is the human inequality that is the outcome of genetic talent and efforts. So where to draw the line? Well, there's been a big debate upon hypoxic chambers versus EPO. Might, let's say, as a thought experiment, they had the same effect. Actually, this builds on the systemic adaptation as developed through evolution, and is on the right side, the left side of the divide. It's not banned. It's not banned, and there is a rationale why it's not banned. It's qualitatively different. Although you may reach the same hematocrit levels, and some say, as long as you reach the same levels, that people do what they want. Well, it is qualitatively different from using a drug that attacks its biological target and overruns the systemic adaptation. There is a qualitative difference there that may make sense in the line drawing exercise. And there is a gray zone here where exactly to draw the line difficult. But these are tentative principles. And at the other very extreme end, you have the completely externally controlled organism, the robot. Can be an interesting sport as well in the future, but it's something else. It's not this cultivation of human excellence as you find in sport. There is no time to go into this really, but it's all over us. It's not necessarily a revolution. The advanced data analysis is part of sports science, but these really powerful technologies, enable practices that can be very challenging. Biased algorithms, it's a black box. You don't really know what's going on. Algorithms search for patterns in an extensive data material. You do not really know all the time what the outcome is. What about data ownership? Informed consent should be there's many issues. What about, at the very end, autonomous decisions made with good judgment? There are means here, interesting means that can cultivate, but also destruct and really challenge basic human values. The same thing with genetic technologies. Now you have to follow what you started. Sorry, didn't mean to be disrespectful. It's a very admirable place to be, a beautiful place to be. But of course, this can be is of great value to humanity, but there are also challenges here. And at the end, where we can really design genetic profiles at the germline level with, let's say, an idea of the optimal genetic setup for a certain sport. You can never produce a top performance, but you can provide a certain basis for it. What does that mean? Well, you're now approaching the limits of sport ethics. Really, this is about the ethics of human enhancement. One of the main questions in philosophy, bioethics, medicine these days. How far should we and can we go? And we can now step out of evolution and create our own design for the future. How far should we go and what are the challenges? It's about much more than local sport ethics, but it affects sport ethics. So, I summarize. Is it possible to draw some distinctions? Well, you need a normative. Well, I've run through some technology categories and the value challenges. And it's obvious that if you want to draw some lines here, you need an idea what the practice is all about. And I've given you very simplistically two ideas. One of the thin theory, perform, see how you can maximize human performance. The thick theory, cultivate a particular kind of human excellence linked to moral value. And at the end now about the limitations of sport ethics, where sport is now intertwined with really some of the big ethical issues of our time, linked to more general ethics of human enhancement. You can see the development here, and the question is how will it be here? So technology in itself is neutral. It's the way we use technology. One end station is this one, and another end station is this one. So what do we prefer? Our choices have to be based on critical and systematic reflection upon values. Thank you.